In the last couple of years, I gave myself a challenge. I wanted to beat all of the modern From Software games, DLC, side bosses, and all. As someone who'd never played a From Software game, very publicly I might add, since I praised Hollow Knight for the losing currency on death mechanic, since at the time I thought it came up with the idea, and seeing as I generally wasn't the most skilled when it comes to video games, this was a pretty tall order. But as I do with most self-imposed challenges, I was dedicated to completing it. It's important to note that this was just a few months before Elden Ring came out. In anticipation of its release, I wanted to play the whole Soulsborne series first. I decided to start with Bloodborne, but with all the hype I saw online for Elden Ring, including the basically universal 10 out of 10 rating, it just got to me, and frankly, I didn't want to play these 6 near perfect games thinking of them as a means to an end, that end being Elden Ring. So after wandering around Central Yarnum for 5 hours with no idea where to go and a determination not to use a guide for some reason, I decided to make Elden Ring my very first Souls game. I don't need to tell you how magical your first playthrough of Elden Ring is. If you've played the game, you know the feeling of finding something super cool or useful around literally every corner. The Lands Between is one of the best designed open world maps to come out of the gaming industry. FromSoft's mastery over map design put them in a perfect position to make one of the most well-realized open worlds ever created. But man was it tough. Not being familiar with the Souls combat loop and starting with a game where they expect exactly that from you, I set myself up for failure. Full honesty, I had watched Bleach pretty recently by this point, and Loretta's great bow looks a lot like Ryu Ishida's bow attack, and that was unironically the deciding factor for me to buy this game first. I really had no idea what I was getting myself into. Though it took a long time and a lot of struggle, I eventually managed to claw my way through, tooth and nail, defeating everything there was to throw myself at through sheer force of will. Learning how to hold my own in Souls combat along the way, I had completed my first Souls game. So after I'd conquered the Lands Between, next came Dark Souls 3, Dark Souls 1, Demon Souls, Bloodborne, and then I finally ended my journey with Dark Souls 2. I'd actually managed to get the Platinum Trophy on Bloodborne, one of only 2 games ever that I've done that, even after making a couple mistakes, including having to play the Old Hunter DLC for the first time on New Game Plus, a fact that I'm very proud of. I pretty quickly started to stay away from the int build that I had used in Elden Ring, and for all the following games, I did a full strength build to maximize the challenge and experience the game like I thought most people probably would. And yeah, it was difficult. It was really hard. It took me about 2 years to finish the challenge, but I did finish it. I defeated every single boss, including DLC and side bosses, in a series known for being the hardest one to complete. But of course, if you're familiar with FromSoft's catalog, or you saw the thumbnail of this video, you've noticed that I left a game out. Generally known to be the hardest game in the series, I decided that Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice would be my final game in this multiple years spanning path of struggle that I lay out for myself. Little did I know, that would be the biggest undertaking of this whole challenge, as in order to beat Sekiro, you have to play by its rules. Rules which were meticulously designed to make you better. January 23rd, 2023, the day I first downloaded Sekiro. I had played through a little bit of the tutorial and got a basic handle on the moment-to-moment combat. While I had been told this game would be supremely difficult, so far, it was nothing I couldn't handle. I got a decent way through the first area, struggling through the mini-bosses as I tried to adapt to the new style of combat. I knew that it would be different from other FromSoft games I had played, but hearing about it and actually having to do the adaptation are 2 very different things. I continued down the main path until I reached the first real boss in the game, Gyoubu Oniwa. Gyoubu would serve as the first roadblock in my path to completing this game. I was able to use the combat system in a very basic sense to get through the regular enemies just fine, but the first real boss of the game, who is designed to be a hard stop to anyone who wasn't playing by the game's rules yet, did exactly that. He stopped me. I threw myself at him time and time again, but at this point I just wasn't ready to defeat him. So, honestly, just for the time being, I gave up. Sekiro is an uncompromising experience. If you try to play by your own rules, or in any way avoid just getting better at it, you will be punished. and Gyoubu is really the first instance of that. Unlike many early Souls bosses, Gyoubu has very little room for error, and that leeway only decreases as the game goes on. There's really no way to defeat Gyoubu that doesn't involve just getting good. And this is what I mean when I say that Sekiro is designed to make you better at it. Unlike the other Souls games, there's no build variety, and even the leveling system, as bare bones as it is compared to FromSoft's other RPGs, requires you to defeat a powerful enemy for each piece of the level up. In every aspect of the game, you're only able to get as far as your skill level will allow, and so for me, this is where I capped out. At this point, I had beaten Dark Souls 3 and decided I just wasn't ready to take on a game as difficult as Sekiro, so I resigned myself to trying again after playing a few more games in FromSoft's catalog to get a better feel for playing difficult games. April 26th, 2023. After making my way through all the bosses in Dark Souls 1 and Demon Souls, as well as plenty other single-player games I had played in between, I decided to pick Sekiro back up. And, to my surprise, during this attempt I found Gyoubu to be really easy, defeating him in less than an hour of attempts. So, what happened? When we as humans learn a skill, it takes a break from performing that skill to let the lessons work their way into your performance. Take fighting a Souls boss, for example. Generally, the best strategy is to take a 10 or so minute break after each couple of attempts to let the information you've learned about the boss's moveset settle in your mind and give your instincts time to adapt to this new information. On my first attempt, I did not give my instincts time to adapt to the new information, and through a combination of improving my game skills in general from playing other games in the series and understanding the boss better, Gyoubu Oniwa fell, and finally, the way forward was open. Now, in this fight, I actually managed to teach myself a lesson that would harm my progress later. On my winning attempt against Gyoubu, I was incredibly over-aggressive, and while that's usually a good thing in Sekiro, I took it too far. I rushed down the boss and presented so much offense that my defense didn't have any time to develop. In order to succeed in Sekiro, you have to be patient and use the boss's moveset against them to build up poise, but in that fight I was just so overly aggressive and scared that I would lose that I mistakenly taught myself that defense wasn't as important to the core combat of Sekiro as it really is. Marching onward, I falsely believed that my triumph over Gyoubu meant that I had mastered the game, and that further challenges would be banal compared to Gyoubu. I progressed further through the main story and through the map, no longer scared and sneaking around normal enemies like I had at the beginning. Now to be clear, this wasn't my final attempt at the game, and this time the hard stopping point I reached was Lady Butterfly. I had reached a point in the game where the only way to make forward progress was one of two options, defeating Lady Butterfly or defeating the long-armed centipede giraffe. Now, I'm not saying that I couldn't beat the long-armed centipede, what I am saying is that I didn't know it was a requirement for furthering the story, and so I didn't give it more than one or two attempts before going back to the losing battle that was Lady Butterfly. Something that should be obvious by now is that when it comes to video games, I am immensely stubborn, and the idea of stopping attempts to go and fill up on snap seeds to make her second phase easier literally did not occur to me as an option. Once I ran out, I just decided to do the fight like normal without any help from consumables. By the way, I'm not trying to gloat, this was a terrible idea. Similarly to Gyoubu, I just couldn't wrap my head around the level of skill that Lady Butterfly demanded. I had gotten a handle on the combat for sure, and I could defeat basic enemies and earlier bosses like Gyoubu no problem, but Lady Butterfly is just on a whole nother level. The next step in your progression to becoming good at this game requires more than just being good enough to scrape through her first phase. She has enough health split between both phases that if you want to get past this fight, you can't just rush her down and hope to get lucky. As I said before, she has an even smaller margin of error than earlier bosses. No. Lady Butterfly is a statement from Miyazaki himself. From here on out, you will be fighting incredibly skilled foes and legendary battles, and if you can't get past her, you won't stand a chance against what comes next. At this point, I hadn't truly realized the mistaken lesson that I learned when I fought Gyoubu, so to defeat Lady Butterfly, it would take relearning the combat to fight the way that the game wanted me to. Once again, in order to move forward with the story, I had to learn to play by Sekiro's rules. By this point, I didn't even know where to begin. I hadn't understood the mistake that I made, so I decided once again to put Sekiro on the back burner. About 2 to 3 times afterwards, I downloaded the game, ran a few attempts by Lady Butterfly, walked around the map to look for where to go next, saw that I didn't have anywhere else to go, then deleted the game and moved on. At this point, I realized that I still wasn't ready to play this game, and I knew that I would need every ounce of skill I could muster to conquer Sekiro. June 30th, 2024. Over a year later. At this point, I had beaten all the other Souls games, so I had no more excuses to not play Sekiro to the finish line. Now, it's do or die. I have to beat this game here and now, or it meant admitting that I just wasn't capable of doing it. I finally decided to start following a guide like I had done with the other games, so I knew where to go next. I quickly dispatched of the long arm and set my sights on Lady Butterfly. I finally realized the mistake that I had made in this fight before, that I was trying to rush it like how I had done with Gyoubu. That was an easy enough fight that you can squeeze out a win by playing the game wrong, but not here. I realized during this fight that in Sekiro, you have to supplement your aggressive offense with patient defense. Rather than attacking constantly and trying to prevent the boss from using any of their moves for fear of taking damage, you have to look at it from a different perspective. A boss throwing out an attack against you is an opportunity to deal damage to their stance bar, not something to fear for the chance of getting hit like I originally thought. Now that I properly understood what Sekiro expected of me, I focused in on the fight, carefully watching Lady Butterfly's movements and timings, slowly but surely whittling down her stance by deflecting her combos. And at 3:20 p.m., I finally defeated Lady Butterfly. Then, at 4:19, I defeated Genichiro. When I first fought Genichiro, I struggled a little bit for sure, but finally being able to put in action the fighting style that the game demanded of me, and hot off a victory literally a year in the making, Genichiro never stood a chance. I even managed to get past his third phase on my first try. At this point, there was nothing left in the world that could stop me. Boss after boss fell to my understanding of the combat. Sure, I hit a few roadblocks here and there that impeded my progress for a few days, but at the end of the day, with everything I had learned, everything that Sekiro hammered into me over a year's worth of failures, I had become unstoppable. Soon enough, I found myself staring down the final boss. After taking so long to make any meaningful progress, a mere 10 days after picking Sekiro back up, I was face to face with my final test. I knew that Sword Saint Ishin would be my hardest test of all, so after arriving at his boss arena somewhere around noon on July 9th, I sat down and made a promise to myself. This is it. I'm going to play this game until I defeat Ishin. No breaks and no excuses. And at 5:48 p.m. on July 9th, 2024, I finally beat Sekiro for the first time. Side bosses, owl father and all, this playthrough had taken me a year and a half. And the next morning, at 10:38 a.m. on July 10th, I did it again. I beat Sekiro for the second time on New Game Plus in less than a day. For those who don't know, Sekiro has two endings. One of them ends the game around the halfway point, but there are unique bosses locked behind that ending that you can't fight any other way. So in order to complete my self-imposed challenge of beating every boss in the game, I had to do both. And what had just taken me a year and a half, now I was able to do in just an evening, and an extra 30 minutes of final boss attempts in the morning. I wasn't just good at Sekiro, but because of the genius way that the progression of this game was crafted, I had finally become a master of Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. Sekiro is one of the greatest games ever made. It's one of the most difficult challenges gaming can offer on a first playthrough, and for most people, child's play on a second. The way that Sekiro makes you better at it as you progress through the main story is a result of some of the most carefully crafted boss, area, and enemy designs ever put to a disc. Of all the masterpieces that From Software has created in the last 15 years, Sekiro is easily one of their best, and I'm thankful for the journey that it led me through. Thankful for the fact that Sekiro forced me to be better. And hey, since we're talking about Souls games, I'm just going to go ahead and flex on you for a second that the Vati Video liked one of my tweets. I posted that he was my #1 most watched YouTube channel this year, which I saw from my YouTube gaming recap, and the fact that he saw it is insane. So if by some miracle, Vati, you're listening to this, thank you for noticing me, and I'm proud to be within the top 0.2% of your listeners. And if anyone's wondering how I got exact dates and times for all of this, it mostly came from the trophies on PlayStation since it records the date and time you earn each one. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really didn't expect anyone to see the last one that I posted, but it ended up becoming my most viewed video of all time so far, which really makes me happy because it's the one that I put the most work into. And I really do think it came out as some of my best work. Although I haven't edited this one yet, so we'll see how it goes. I just wanted to say welcome and thank you to everyone who subscribed from that video. It really does mean the world to me that you enjoyed my content enough to want more. So, anyway, I'm done rambling for today. I'll see you all next time. Peace.